Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the National Archives Foundation's virtual program series. I'm Patrick Madden, the Executive Director of the National Archives Foundation. Through this programming, we are pleased to open the doors of the National Archives virtually and share the treasures of the past with all of you through these spirited conversations. I hope you're receiving our American Experience emails and History Snacks emails. If not, you can go to our website at archivesfoundation.org, and there's a historical treat in there every week for everyone. Before we begin, I want to make sure everyone knows our distinguished speaker will be taking questions later in the program, and we wanted to make sure that you have the chance to ask those questions. So we're going to be using the YouTube chat function. I see we've got some regulars here. They already know what I'm going to tell you to do, which is to practice where to put your questions. Send us your hometown and your state, and we'll give you a shout out later on. I see we've got a whole bunch of folks from around the country here already. That's really exciting. So stay tuned, and you don't have to wait until the end to ask your questions. If you have a question as he's making his presentation, feel free to put your question in, and we'll have them all queued up for when we get to that point. So I've had the fortune of visiting the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library a number of times, and in my current role, I've had the chance to partner with our guests through our civics programming, which has really been terrific, and I hear we'll learn quite a bit about. Duke is the Dean of the Presidential Library Directors. He has been with the library for 20 years, and to give you some sense of things, I've had 4 jobs during that time since I first met him when I was at the Smithsonian. And he definitely doesn't look as young as he seems, but his bio says that he keeps taking his pills and they're all helping. So I think you're going to find out that we're going to have a blast. Duke, are you with us out there? Are you in a secure location?
I can't tell you where I am, but yes, it is secure. And thank you for that wonderful introduction.
Of course, of course. You can always tell when you know someone really well by the introduction. Duke, first, before we have you jump into your program, it's been a difficult time for everyone. Tell us, how are you doing? How's the staff doing out there during this time with the facility closed?
Well, most importantly, the staff is, I think, doing a great job of being productive, staying mentally healthy. We concern ourselves with that as the leadership at the library and my senior management team. So we try to reach out to them weekly, if not daily, to make sure everybody's fine. There's been some losses that we've had, which has been difficult, but overall, I think the team has risen to the occasion, and I absolutely could not be prouder than what they've been able to accomplish.
I'm sure. And I've heard lots of stories of the resilience of the staff, my staff, the foundation, but I mean, across the archives family. I mean, folks are just, it's been very heartwarming to hear all the different roles, different hats people are wearing while they're at home and so forth. Well, I'm not going to let folks wait any longer. I know you have a lot to tell us. Super excited to hear about the library and the museum. And I have a feeling we'll have a question or two when you're all done. So I'm going to let you take it away.
Great. Thank you, Patrick. And thank you, everybody, for joining us for this virtual tour. So what we're going to go, if Keneal, if you could put the first slide up. We're going to start back in the late 1980s, early 1990s. This is actually an aerial shot of the property that was given to the Reagan Foundation to build the library. Originally, they were looking at Stanford University, but that didn't work out. And so this 100-acre plot came available. Next slide, please. And you can see at the groundbreaking ceremony, President and Mrs. Reagan turning the soil. And you'll notice it's pretty much scrub grass back there. But in the end, you will see what we've been able to transform the mountaintop. The next slide, please. This shows you mid-construction of the main library and museum. You can see that there was a lot of work that needed to be done, but as you will see in the next slide, this is what happens when it's all said and done. So I'm going to give you some stats that can give you kind of the overall look of this. And if anybody has any questions, please use the chat function on YouTube. Originally, as I mentioned, it was 100 acres, but over the past number of years, the foundation has been able to acquire a couple hundred more. So I think they're over 300, which is nice because we want to maintain the view sites that we have. There's approximately 270,000 square feet of building space. The big square in the background, that's Air Force One Pavilion. We'll talk about that in a minute. Now here's something we've got for the museum. There's approximately 125,000 square feet. But what's interesting is that if you start admissions and you walk through the entire museum experience, you're going to walk over 2 miles. So we have a rather large facility and some amazing stuff. And quite frankly, I'm only going to show you a portion of that today because we just don't have enough time. Downstairs, we have over 65 million documents. We have over 64,000 objects and artifacts, 1.6 million photographs, literally hundreds and hundreds of thousands of feet of film and audio. And then, of course, we have a research room, and that's where scholars, authors, journalists, students come and do research. So what I'd like to do now, that kind of gives you the stats of where we are. Oh, we're in Simi Valley, California, if you don't know that, about an hour north west of Los Angeles. So I'm going to talk about the grounds, but before we go to the next slide, I want you to take a look at, thank you, Keneal. Take a look at the circle there. So that's the western portion of the library. And we actually built that, probably 18 years ago, because we wanted to have kind of the White House South Lawn look. So it pays tribute to the Olmsted design of the South Lawn. And that's where both of the funerals took place. So now if we go to the next slide, you'll see kind of the entrance that leads up to the courtyard. And you'll notice the portrait on the banner there. When you first get off the main drag and go up Presidential Drive, which winds up the hill, we actually have portraits on banners of every president, and it kind of sets the stage for everybody as they come visit. And the next slide, you'll see the courtyard. I wish the fountain was going, but it's under repair, I understand. So this brings you to the entrance, and you'll see this wonderful statue in the next slide. This is of Ronald Reagan. It's called After the Ride by Glenna Goodacre, and it welcomes you to the admissions. And you can't really see it in this slide, but the hand, a lot of people love to shake the hand of the president, take pictures, hold his finger, and so the bronze is starting to rub a little bit, pretty much like any statue around. The next statue that you take a look at is a relatively recent acquisition. The foundation was very generous to be able to acquire this, and we put this in the circle outside of Air Force One, and this is President Reagan on horseback. He was quite an accomplished equestrian, so it's a wonderful tribute. But guess what? There's other things on the outside of the grounds too. If you see this really cool picture, oh, sorry, I got it mixed up. I can't see the next slide. This is actually a historic picture because you've got President Reagan and former General Secretary Mikhail Gorbachev at the first piece of the Berlin Wall that was able to come to the United States. That's what it looks like at the beginning, at the opening of the library. And if you go to the next slide, you will see what it looks like today. So we've done some modifications, but we wanted to have access. And of course, the gratuitous sunset shot that can show you the beautiful piece of property that we have. Now, I believe the next shot will be of the F-117. Now, I don't know about you, but that's pretty darn cool. Again, the foundation was able to secure this just a little while ago, and we were able to put it on display. And a bit of trivia, this is the only F-117 installation outside of a military base. So we were quite proud. Another plane, which you'll see next, is we have an F-14. And this pays tribute to the Libyan raid during President Reagan's tenure. And then, of course, one more shot of the F-117 with, of course, a sunset. You can actually make out the Pacific Ocean underneath that layer of sunset there, so we're really quite pleased. So now what I'd like to do is go inside. So Keneal, if you would take us inside. Oh, blew it again, sorry about that. One of the most visited places in the library is the gravesite. This is where both President and Mrs. Reagan are buried, and it's a very peaceful, very stately, and they wanted to be buried so they could look out. If you turn around and look towards the ocean, they can see the ocean. A very, very beautiful tribute to both of them. Now I think we will go inside. So this is the kind of the entrance gallery, presidential seal in brass on the floor, and that wonderful portrait of the president with that wonderful smile. Off to the left in the back there, you can see the only statues that I know of that depict both President and Mrs. Reagan. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see that we have an Oval Office. What's a presidential library without an Oval Office? But I got actually a funny story about this, is because when the president wanted to have a full-scale Oval Office, and so when they decided on the design, it was going to be the outside. It was going to be this Santa Barbara mission style, kind of low, etc. Well, the architects were in a bit of a quandary, and they came to the president and said, "Mr. President," now I wasn't there, so I'm being told this. So if I get it off a little bit, bear with me. But basically, they said we can't fit the height of the Oval Office into the architecture. We don't know what to do. The president looks at him and says, "Dig a hole." Now, that is classic Ronald Reagan. So if you go to the next slide, it'll show a close-up of the Resolute desk. I'm sure many people know about the Resolute desk, but after my presentation, we're going to ask, there's a little bit of a trivia question. There's 2 modifications that have happened, and please don't go on Google to find it out, that happened to this desk. All right, next slide, please. So throughout the museum, we have a number of interactives, a number of dozens. This is one about dining in the White House. And in the background, that's actually a mirror, you can see those red cases. That's where we house some of the many presidential gifts. And they're quite spectacular in some of the presentations. So if we go to the next slide, one of my personal favorite displays in the museum is the president's personal diary. And what I find interesting about this is that almost every day of his presidency, he actually wrote in this diary. There's 5 volumes. And the reason they did that is when they left the gubernatorial mansion, they didn't remember a lot of the stuff. So they said, okay, we're going to write this down. And it was really never meant to be published. It was just his notes and his thoughts and his feelings. But there's one entry that is dated the day of his assassination attempt, which I think is extremely poignant, but it gives you an insight into Ronald Reagan, the man. Now remember, this was not necessarily going to be published. So I'm going to read this short passage. "Getting shot hurts. Still, my fear was growing because no matter how hard I tried to breathe, it seemed I was getting less and less air. I focused on that tiled ceiling and prayed, but I realized I couldn't ask for God's help, while at the same time I felt hatred for the mixed up young man who had shot me. Isn't that the meaning of the lost sheep? We are all God's children and therefore equally beloved by him. I began to pray for his soul and that he would find his way back to the fold." I don't know about you, but that's pretty impressive. The guy tried to kill him, and that's what the president was writing. So I feel that that is wonderful. And the way we have the presentation, you can actually electronically go through each of the pages. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, what's the biggest artifact that we have? Bingo, Air Force One. We are very fortunate to be able to house this magnificent aircraft. The 707, 7 presidents flew on. President Reagan flew over 600,000 miles, 26 different countries. And the design of this is truly spectacular. If you go to the next slide, you will see, okay, that picture window, it's almost a full acre. And what you might not notice is that the plane is on pillars, but it's at just a slight 2-degree tilt. And when you go on board and you look through the cockpit windows, the flight deck windows, and you look out and all you see is the mountain, it feels like you're taking one final flight for freedom and democracy. So we were very pleased on how we were able to design this. And if you take to the next slide, you can also see what we have. We have a presidential motorcade. To the left, or at least to my left, is the Secret Service vehicle, which was actually a Secret Service vehicle. That's a real presidential limousine and LAPD squad car and motorcycles. And then the final shot from the Air Force One pavilion is Marine One. And this is actually a Johnson era Marine One because they're just now retiring the Reagan ones. So, all right, let's go to the next slide. We'll take you more through the museum. As I had mentioned, we have a number of interactives. You know, one of the challenges in teaching history and things like economic recovery, how do you do that? And so working with the foundation, we created this interactive table, which is tough to see, but trust me, it makes it a lot easier to understand economics than trying to read book on the wall. So let's go to the next slide. One of my favorite galleries is the combination with Camp David and Rancho del Cielo, Ranch in the Sky, his ranch just north of Santa Barbara. You can see some of the wonderful saddles and some of the belt buckles, and you see that mannequin horse. And we went old school this way. We decided that we wanted to have an opportunity, a safe opportunity for people to take a picture as if they were riding with President Reagan. So the backdrop, which you can't see because of the picture angle, it shows the president on horseback, and you get it, and the picture takes, and it looks like you're riding with the president. The unfortunate thing is we couldn't afford a full horse, so we got a quarter horse. Okay, that wasn't that funny, but I can't hear any humor, but please just laugh. Next slide. All right, one of the most poignant aspects of the experience, the museum, is this November 5th, 1994 letter written by the president in his own hand. This is on display there, where he tells the American public that he has Alzheimer's. And what I find fascinating about it is he's so eloquent. Now, I'm not going to read it today because you can go online and read it. But he hits the nail right on the head. And think about this. This is in his own hand. And you're trying to have this momentous impact of this horrible disease. And he only makes one scratch out. I don't know about you, but I can't write a thank you note without multiple scratch outs. So this is a wonderful tribute to the president and how he communicated. So at the end of the museum, the regular museum tour, we have some temporary space. So let's go into the temporary galleries. And I'm going to explain to you 2 or 3 of some of the temporary exhibits that we've had in the past. The foundation is very generous in supporting us in this regard. And we've had the whole gamut. But what we have found is that temporary exhibits give us a chance to tell more history and bring people in for different reasons. This is a fun, lighthearted one about baseball, and you can see the diamond that we put in there and the artifacts around there. And if you go to the next slide, you can start to see some of the details. Of course, New York is famous for baseball, I should say. And if you go to the next slide, you can see some of the historic. This goes back to the 19th century. Our collector friend who lives here locally had an amazing collection. And of course, we've got the LA Dodgers, which is our hometown team. So next is a really, probably one of our most spectacular and successful exhibits, and that is Lincoln. And what we've learned in our temporary exhibit is that, first of all, we have about 10 or 11,000 square feet. So we're very fortunate in that regard. So we can really have blockbusters. But what we've determined is if you combine history and Hollywood, it's a great draw because it gets people to understand what happened in history in a contemporary setting. So if you go to the next slide, you will see we have the history. We've got one of his hats. And of course, that's iconic and lots of people take pictures, blah, 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 blah. But then the next slide, you will see this is the actual set from Steven Spielberg's film Lincoln. Now, Rick Carter, who did the set design, won an Academy Award for the film. He and his team did an immense amount of research to make this as historically accurate as possible. So you will never, in my opinion, get a more accurate depiction of the office in Lincoln's White House. And there's a wonderful story because during the latter part of the exhibit, Mr. Spielberg called up and said, "I'd like to come see it." And we said, of course. He says, "But I don't want anything special. We'll just go in." So we meet him. I said, "Hey, Mr. Spielberg." He said, "Please call me Steven." Okay, Steven. So we go in. So you've got Steven Spielberg, you've got Rick Carter and myself and a couple of others around. And we go to the entrance and there's a line. And so he doesn't want to go in front of him. So we wait there in the line. And so we're sitting there and people are coming up to him, taking pictures. He's being very gracious. And finally I said, "Steven," I said, "let's just go in." So we go in and it was like a kid in a candy store. His eyes were bright wide. He started taking pictures. He started texting like we all do. But instead of texting, your mom or your friend, he's texting and sending pictures to Sally Field and Daniel Day-Lewis and other celebrities. So it was a really wonderful experience. The next slide, you'll see an Army hospital from the war. And this is where he looks at this and looks over to his set. He says, "It's as if I did the movie so you guys could do this wonderful exhibit." And we thought, wow, that's pretty cool. The final gallery you'll see on the next slide is kind of a wide angle. And what's important about this is on the left side of the screen, you'll see a depiction of the Peterson house. And that's where he passed away. The vitrine at the foot of the bed actually housed the bloody pillow that he passed away on. And again, Stephen and Rick were there, and our exhibit specialist, Rob Zuka, was there. And he had designed this portion of the exhibit. And Rick turns to me and he says, "Man, you did a better job than I did in the movie." Again, that was wonderful to be able to, take that compliment. And the whole crew, Rob and everybody, were very proud. So now let's go to another blockbuster. This one is Titanic. So this gives you an idea how we try to theme exhibits in the cases, so it makes it look like it's from a ship. Now, these are all original artifacts. Some had never been together since the actual sinking. So you go to the next slide, you will see a movie prop. This is actually of the sinking, and this was from the movie. And then the next slide, you will see Rose's stateroom, where obviously plays very heavily in the movie. And we were fortunate, like Spielberg, that James Cameron came by and spent a whole bunch of time with the staff and visitors and telling behind the scenes stories. So it was really good. Again, the history and the Hollywood blending was wonderful. The next slide is not the most dramatic, but it's actually one of my favorites because the boat there was used in the movie, which is kind of cool. But the side of the ship, that is to exact scale. And it's like 14 feet tall and 25 or 30 feet long. And exactly dimensions with the rivets and the paint and all that stuff. And that was designed by our team, and they reproduced this. And to me, the attention to detail was extraordinary. The last slide I'll show you on this exhibit is of the telegraph room, or what I call the signal room or the telegraph room, where, part of the issue of the sinking happened. And again, it gives you a depiction of what it was like back when it sailed. So temporary exhibits are not the only thing we do. We do programs. And the next one, this slide, shows you one of the presidential debates. We are the only presidential library that has hosted 3 presidential debates. And here they are in the first one. If you go to the next slide, you will see the first one was on the second floor. The next 2, we actually built platform right next to Air Force One. That gives you a wonderful indication. And they were magnificent. And then the final slide of the debates is my favorite, and that's Mrs. Reagan with the 10 candidates in our Oval Office. And it was irony. It was like, in the first debate, they're sitting at the base of Air Force One saying, "I want to fly on that." And this one, they say, "I want this as my office." So that's a wonderful tribute to Mrs. Reagan. So one of the other programs that we do is called the Situation Room Experience. And you can see behind me, I am actually in the Situation Room. And a little bit of history, 2006, President Bush had the Situation Room renovated with new technology, new design, and they saved 2 of the rooms. And we were very fortunate to have One of the rooms is the secure video transmission site, which I'm sitting in right now. And we've created, if you go to the next 2 slides, you'll see the sets that we've created, one more, and this shows you the actual room. Now, what's fascinating, this is the actual room. Everything in that room, with the exception of the chairs and the new monitors, is from the White House, okay? So when you sit in this room, you feel as if you were in the White House. And we've created an educational program unlike anywhere in the world. And so we're quite proud of it. I'll show you one more slide, and then what we're going to do is go to a video. Clearly, we don't have enough time on this broadcast today, but you can see that there's the White House press podium, because that's part of the game that we play in the lessons. And so now I'm going to have Keneal play a 40-second clip of the Situation Room experience.
This is Alex Gertz, KARR News. We have a reliable report.
This is Situation Room Control. We have a secure transmission from Marine 2.
Is the Attorney General there? Somebody!
The Situation Room experience is incredible.
Wonderful.
Extraordinary.
Phenomenal.
Intense.
Amazing.
Transformative.
Powerful.
The Situation Room experience is the ultimate team building exercise. Here you can experience something that looks, feels, and acts like a real crisis without the consequences.
We haven't shared it yet. No, we haven't.
It is a modern, fictional foreign policy crisis.
So that gives you a kind of a teaser of what the program is like. And what's really extraordinary is we've been working with Patrick and the NAF Foundation, National Archives Foundation, and we've actually created a virtual experience that will be coming to you soon. So with that, I thank you all for listening. Hopefully I didn't bore you too much, and now I'm going to turn it back to Patrick, who can lead us in a wonderful debate.
All right. Well, that was fantastic, Duke. Thank you. I do want to, that last picture reminds me of how much property you have, and obviously the transformation over the years from the groundbreaking forward. I know right now you all are dealing, California, the West Coast, is dealing with lots of fires. Is the facility been impacted by that? Obviously it's closed to the public, but last year I remember talking to you the day there was a fire that was literally like at the parking lot. So can you just sort of talk about what's happening right now? But then I know you have a very interesting fire management system that you guys have in place out there.
So first of all, our hearts and prayers go out to those all affected throughout the West Coast of the fires. They're truly devastating. And we know firsthand because last year, fire engulfed completely 360 degrees around the library. It came within 50 feet of the Air Force One pavilion. We had a little bit of infrastructure damage with the foundation's internet, but the firefighting team really saved it. And when you talk about fire management, the foundation hosts every year, which is one of the community's favorite times, is brush clearance. And you're going, brush clearance? Oh, that's really exciting. Well, we use goats. And we have a goat herder, we have fences that we put up, and there's hundreds of goats, and they eat everything. And the people absolutely love it. But the fireman said that, the firefighter said that is what helped save the library. So it's always a fun thing. And we're very blessed with our location, despite the fire danger.
Well, I know we want to get into some questions here. First of all, I want to remind everyone you are taking questions and to use the chat box. We've seen a few come in, and I want to thank folks from around the country who are with us. We got Albany, New York, Las Vegas, Grand Rapids, Leesburg. We've got, Colorado, Iowa City, Omaha, New Jersey. We've got Sunnyvale, Chevy Chase, Maryland, of course, Washington. We got Florida. Pretty much got the whole country covered there, Duke. So Reagan is lots of interest in Reagan, always has been. And you didn't, one thing you didn't talk about is the research side. So obviously there's a public side of the museum, folks can come and learn about the administration, the legacy, all these different components, as well as the special exhibits. But how many folks do you get every year? What are they researching? Just give us a feel for the research side of it.
Prior to COVID, okay, because we've been closed for 6 months, and who knows when we'll be able to welcome researchers back. I mean, you get researchers literally from all over the world. They're studying particular issues. It might be, NATO. It might be the PATCO strike. It might be, they're writing a book on the president. We've had, dozens and dozens of authors that come and do research. We have students who are doing projects. We have journalists, during the debates or prior to the debates, they might come and do some research. And we'll get, I don't know, between 500 and 900 a year, depending. And some years, depending on what's being released and what's not, we'll get more. And so the research room is post-COVID is open 5 days a week, just like the museum 10 to 5. And there are certain protocols that you have to follow that have nothing to do with COVID, but we welcome researchers of all stripes.
Great. Well, you mentioned something that we usually get a question about documents. It's been almost 40 years. Talk to us a little bit about things are still being released. Not everything is out in the public. What the process is.
Well, okay, so I've got a team of archivists, supervisory archivists that do nothing but research. That's the wrong thing. They make sure that all the protocols are followed in the release of the documents. And so that happens. I think we're somewhere around 45 or 50% of our materials that are open. So there's still, 20 years left of review. And there's all these protocols that they have to go through. And so, if there are national security issues, they have to be sent to the agencies and stuff like that. But we're just like any of the other PRA libraries that in making access happen to our documents, we try as fast as we can.
Terrific. Well, let's jump into some of the questions here. I have a geography question for you. How far away is the Reagan Ranch from the library?
Well, from a drive perspective, it's about an hour and a half to the base of the mountain. Okay, it's just north of Santa Barbara. I've had the fortunate opportunity to visit there a couple of times, but then getting up to the hill, it can vary because it's a small mountain, windy road. So it's about an hour and a half.
Okay. And you showed the baseball exhibit, and I think this was inspired by this. Are there any videos or maybe audios of, and I didn't know this until I was reading the question. I didn't realize Reagan used to do Cubs announcer. You get the wires and act like the broadcaster. Are there audios of this? Have they been released? Do you have them? Are they somewhere else where someone might be able to listen to Reagan doing Cubs games?
I don't, to be honest with you, I don't know if we actually have the recordings, but I can check with Steve Branch, who is our AV audio archivist. But there's a wonderful story about Ronald Reagan before he was president, obviously. And he used to call the games on a teletype machine. Okay, so it would come in and he would announce it on WHO and the radio, right? And so this one time the machine broke. And so he's sitting there going on live radio. It's like right now we're live. Okay, what happens if the screen goes dead? You got to react. So I don't know, for the next 15 or 20 minutes, he said, and the pitch, and he fouls it off. It's going, oh, that guy grabbed it. And he had so many foul balls and strikes that he lasted. And then it started going up again, and he was able to finish the game. Classic Ronald Reagan.
So tell us about, obviously there's a lot of presidential gifts, objects. Do you have a favorite object or artifact? Pick your favorite child.
Well, yeah, right. Well, one of the most unusual is this big ball of yarn. And you're sitting there going, why would somebody send the president a big ball of yarn? And the reason is there was a knitting club down in, I think it was northern San Diego County, okay? And there was a conference on aging in the White House, and they wanted to send a message that this is important, okay? Rather than just send a letter saying this is important, they sent this big ball of yarn as we think this is important. So I think that is pretty unusual. There is, oh gosh, there's so many jewel encrusted things. There is, I wish Jennifer Torres, our registrar, was here, because I think we have something from just about every country in the world. Well, they change, the countries change. So we're very fortunate in that regard. Here's one. There is, again, I don't favorite, but this is an unusual one. You know, we get all sorts of portraits, and some of the portraits are not really that good, and some of them are okay. But this one, you look at it and you're going, what? It's kind of soft. It depicts him, but and when you look at it, it's actually made from butterfly wings. And I thought, oh my gosh. Now, I was told that they only use the right wings. Okay, I'm sorry. Oh yes,
Well
we've got like 4,000 objects downstairs.
Terrific. Do you have what would you say if you're coming for a visit? We've got some logistics questions. People are already planning for you to be reopened, and they want to come. How much time do you recommend for a visit to the library and the museum?
Okay, absolute minimum 2 hours. Okay, because as I mentioned in my presentation, there's 2.25 miles of just walking. Okay. And so just to walk, it takes about 45 minutes, okay? But if you're reading and stuff like that. So you've got the permanent museum and Air Force One pavilion. So, and there's just a lot to see, okay? Then when we have a temporary exhibit, whether it's, you know, baseball, Lincoln, or the Egypt's Lost Cities or whatever, that's another hour, okay? And then you have the grounds. You know, you want to stroll through the grounds to see the planes, to see the statues, and of course, visit the gravesite. And we also have a Gold Star Memorial here that we put in about a year or so ago, which is it's quite a tribute to the Gold Star families. And so it really, anywhere between 2 and 4 hours. And of course, we have restaurant facilities on site. Matter of fact, we just renovated the restaurant, and it's, well, it's supposed to be spectacular. We haven't been able to eat there. So, you know, but yes, 2 to 4 hours minimum.
Okay. And is there a permanent part of the gallery that's a sort of a favorite with visitors? Obviously your temporary exhibits will change and draw people in, but of the permanent gallery, if you take, I guess, Air Force One out, 'cause it's kind of its own bubble.
That's the 800-pound gorilla in the room. People love the Oval Office, okay? Because, you know, how many of us really get the chance to visit the Oval Office? And it is an exact replica of how it was when the president was during his administration. And so that's always fascinating to see. Another one is Mrs. Reagan's gallery is quite beautiful. We have a number of her gowns and outfits, but also some of the more important things, you know, like Just Say No to Drugs campaign that people like to see. And then of course you've got the ranch in Camp David, which is, you know, extraordinary. And in my opinion, the most powerful is starting with the Alzheimer's letter, and then the next one you go into is about the funeral. And having been through it here, the outpouring of, you know, feelings and support for the president from all over, from all different stripes, and to listen to some of those speeches, it's really, really powerful.
Well, I think you answered one of the questions about Mrs. Reagan. There was a question about his service in World War II. you didn't, in the sort of overview of the museum, you didn't mention that. Is there a space where it talks about his naval service?
It's actually a first motion picture unit. And I think there might be to be honest with you, it's been a long time since I've been in there, but I think there's a small mention of it. But it was, I mean, the challenge that any president has, that or foundation or library has, is you've got so much to choose from that you simply can't use to tell it all. But that was the first motion picture unit that he belonged.
Okay, and so this is sort of on the point of interesting or different kind of objects and documents. Does the museum have anything from Soviet dissidents or objects from the former Soviet Union?
The answer is yes, and there's one in particular that is personal to me because I had been here only a couple of years, and I was in the gallery, and one of my staff members came up to me and said, "Duke, there's these 3 priests in the gallery." And I thought there was going to be a joke about these 3 priests in the gallery, right? No, there was these 3 priests, and I cannot pronounce his name, but we have, I'll tell you in a second what we have of his on display there. But it turns out that Father S, as I will call him, had been imprisoned for a total of, I want to say either 20 or 26 years total in different time periods for his religious belief in the Soviet Union. And it was Ronald Reagan that set him free. And so he started talking. He didn't speak English, but he had a translator. And he started speaking and he started crying. And you're sitting, he owed his life to Ronald Reagan. And I said, would you mind if we could arrange for you to come back and do an oral history? And it was, these stories don't make the paper, but this is the real life of a priest who spent 20 to 26 years behind in awful conditions in prison camp. And when we did it, it was difficult because he broke up quite a bit during the conversation. But in the end, he gave us his prison uniform and his hat, and we have that on display.
Wow, very powerful. So we have a couple of history questions here for you. Is it true Merv Griffin convinced Reagan to run for governor of California?
I cannot answer that question. I just don't know, but I can tell you Merv Griffin was a close personal friend and was wonderful. And I got a funny story about Merv. So I'm sorry, I am not the Reagan historian. So you'd need one of the archivists to really tell. You talk about the library and what we've done for the past 20, 30 years, I can address that. So I apologize to the historians out there. But if you email me at duke.blackwood@nara.gov, I will get back to you with the answer. So, but I love this story. So this is when Mrs. Reagan was alive and Merv was alive. And there was some event that she was at, and we were strolling through the museum. And Merv was there, and he was hanging back with me because everybody wanted to be with Miss Reagan. And we come in the museum, there's a portrait of the president at the Rock River where he was a lifeguard and saved all these lives. And so Merv goes to me, he says, "Duke, did I ever tell you a story that I was talking to the president about his lifeguard?" And I said, "No." He says, "Well, we were in the White House and the president started regaling all of his stories of life-saving, and Merv was there. And he says, Mr. President, of those 77 lives that you saved, how many were women?" And the president got this chuckle and he says, "Well, Merv, they were all women." And Merv goes to him and he says, "Are you sure they were drowning?" And that's a Merv Griffin story.
There you go. Speaking of which, you're very close geography relative to DC, close to Hollywood. Do you have a lot of Hollywood famous actors coming to visit? What's your engagement? Obviously, the Titanic one was an opportunity to engage. That show is to engage the Hollywood industry, but just on a sort of year-to-year basis.
On a regular basis, not as much anymore. Years ago, we had much more because they were alive, and a lot of them are passing on. But with exhibits like Titanic or Lincoln, we do attract them. And obviously the relationship that President and Mrs. Reagan had bode well for that. So, but that's tapering off, and it just depends on what's happening here, because if we do a big event like a debate, Foundation does the debate, you'll get, all stripes here. So.
So I got a couple more questions. I know we have a little factoid we want to throw back up on the screen to finish up. Did Nancy Reagan speak at the funeral?
At the president's funeral? No.
No. Okay.
No.
And then a personal question for you. For younger folks who are watching, what kind of educational background do you need to become an archivist or work at a library in the kind of position that you have attained?
Well, okay, my position is pretty much different than an archivist. You don't have to be an archivist to become director of the library. Other than when my daughter was 14, she says, I'm going to grow up to be a presidential library director. I don't think there's too many people that say that. I came into it because I was a supporter of the president, and I was working at a university, and the cards aligned. But I'm not a historian. I'm not an archivist. So I'm not necessarily the one to model your career after if you want to work at a presidential library. And there's different departments. On the museum side, there's museum study course or classes and degrees that you can go. Generally speaking, library science or library type degrees, history degrees, and then you can specialize. I don't know of a lot of schools that have archival programs, but I know Northridge here locally used to. Cal Poly, I think, had one. So you can actually check with the college or university that you're interested in, saying, hey, I'd like to be an archivist. What's the best path? I don't want to lead somebody on a path that might not be the best, because things have changed significantly since I've been here. But the universities are the way to go.
That's a great segue to, a number of the presidential libraries are either situated on university campuses or associated with them. Is the Reagan Library associated with one? Do you work with several?
We are not associated with one particular, and clearly we're not on the campus of any. But both with the foundation programs and the library programs, we work with a number of universities across the country. And some that we're working with locally now are Cal Lutheran, Pepperdine, USC, UCLA. And then I know the foundation has the institute in Washington that they're working with. They have they have a year-long program that before COVID. So, but yeah, we work with multiple universities.
And what about the other presidential libraries? Do you work with them? And one particular question, do you work with the Democratic presidential libraries?
Yes, I work with all libraries. As a matter of fact, one of the programs that we're talking to you all about at the National Archives Foundation is an adaptation of the Situation Room experience to the virtual experience. So we actually have a VSIM, as we call it, that you can play anywhere in the world. And just today, as a matter of fact, we engaged 6 other presidential libraries in the development of this, and we hope to be able to create additional scenarios. The next 2 that we're looking at hopefully would be Kennedy and Roosevelt. But we're apolitical here. Regardless of my personal political beliefs, we talk about history, and we want to promote that. And working with my colleagues across the spectrum is not only important, but quite frankly, it's a lot of fun.
Okay, so we've got two fun questions to close out. Can you see the Pacific Ocean from the library?
Yes, about half the time of the year you can. I think it's like 30 miles as the crow flies, and then you can actually look out beyond that to see the Channel Islands. You saw some of the pictures like of the F-117 and of the Berlin Wall. I mean, it's just spectacular. And what was interesting is during the president's funeral, he wanted the ceremony, we wanted it timed at sunset. And so, and you don't know when he's going to pass, so it's very difficult, but it was June 5th. And when that sunset and when we laid him to rest, this is an extraordinary location.
Very good. Well, you teed it up in your presentation. I know we want to go back to the Oval Office, and we want to test our viewers here a little bit of history. So tell us about this. What's your question for our audience?
Okay, so this is the Resolute desk, all right? And now I'm pretty sure there's only been 2 modifications done. So if there's someone smarter than me out there, please let us know via the chat. But there's been 2 modifications, okay? The first was, if you look at the eagle right at the front there, when the desk was first built, it did not have that door there. The most famous picture is of John peeking out while the President Kennedy was sitting there. But Roosevelt had that put in there. Now, here's the question. What was the second modification? How do you want me to answer it? I mean, what do you want me to do here?
Let's give our audience a second or two here to queue up.
I'll give you a hint. It has to do with President Reagan.
Shocker.
And you can actually, if you look closely, you can see it.
So we've got, let's see if they're queuing up here. Give me 1 second. Looks like we've got somebody who has, yes, the desk was raised to accommodate the length of Reagan's legs.
Correct. So if you look at the bottom, there's about 2.5 inches that it was raised. So what happened is you can barely see his chair looking over the top of the desk, okay? That was the chair that he loved and used in the gubernatorial mansion or office. And when he brought it to Washington, he was too big. So he had the White House carpenters add that section. So next time you're invited to the Oval Office, you can tell the president, hey, did you know that that's what happened? So very good, whoever that was. Send me your name and I'll give you a free admission to the library.
We had another answer. It was to include jelly bean dispenser, which I thought was a good idea.
All right, you got me on that one. I forgot my jelly beans. That's great, Patrick. Okay, here's the trivia question. What was this is to you, Patrick. What was his favorite flavor?
Green.
Licorice.
Oh, would not have guessed that. There you
Yeah.
go. Another fun fact. See, we are full of all kind of history here at the
Well,
National
like I said, we
Archives.
were very blessed to be able to have such a wonderful team here, both with the National Archives staff. I couldn't be prouder, and working with the foundation. They've been very generous over the years, and working with the likes of the National Archives Foundation and our brethren across the country. Presidential libraries, to me, are very important, and let's celebrate them.
Absolutely. Well, we've been delighted to have the chance to kick off this series and expose the audience, our viewers, to the Presidential Library System. Some people don't even know the archives runs that. And so we're going to make our way through all of them. I really appreciate your time. I've enjoyed knowing you over the years, especially since I arrived at the foundation. We've had a number of fun collaborations, and I absolutely look forward to the next time I can physically get out to California, see some more of those West Coast sunsets and visit all the new things you keep adding to the library. So Duke, thanks so much for your time this afternoon. Thank your team as well, and look forward to talking to you soon.
All right, thank you.
All right.
And just one final thing, though, if people do have any questions that I was not able to answer, please, it's duke.blackwood@nara.gov. And also, if you're interested in the situation, if you're a teacher out there, if you know teachers, whether it's the virtual sim or the situation room experience, please reach out to us, because we're very excited to have an impact in education. So with that,
Absolutely.
Big to do. Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot, Duke. And I'll just close out here with a couple of announcements. We appreciate all of you that are joined us today, especially our donors and members. If you're not a donor or member, you too can be part of this cool group of history buffs by joining our website, going to our website to join, archivesfoundation.org. And you might be aware that we have a few historical items that include Ronald Reagan, but also many other US history merchandise at our store, nationalarchivestore.org. When you're in Washington, when we're reopened, you will see we've got the greatest store in Washington, but online, it's a great way to support the National Archives while we're closed. Coming up, we have a number of programs we want to make sure you're aware of. Coming up on the 22nd at 5 p.m. Eastern time, we've got a continuation of the library series. We're going to visit the Hoover Library in West Branch, Iowa. So we got a little competition for Duke there. And then at the end of the month on the 29th, we've got a terrific program where we're going to unlock today's weather using old Navy law books through a digitization project that's happening at the National Archives, and talk about some of the things we'll be actually releasing and rolling out some things during that program. It's been going on for a couple of years. Really exciting way of using old documents using technology today to learn about our weather and climate that NOAA is partnering with the archives on. Really interesting stuff. And then on October 6th at 7 p.m., History Speaks, Race and Reform in America. It's a special online fundraiser for the National Archives Foundation. We hope you'll support us through this by going to our website and buying an e-ticket. It's going to feature Soledad O'Brien, Taylor Branch, Pulitzer Prize winning historian around the civil rights, Dr. Ibram Kendi, New York Times bestselling author, and Wes Lowry, a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist. So visit our website for that, archivesfoundation.org/rights for more details and to purchase a ticket. You can learn more about these programs and all the other things that we're doing through social media. So I hope you'll follow us there. We're on all the major channels. And remember, what is past is prologue. Until next time, on behalf of the National Archives Foundation, thank you for joining us today.